A major problem in the family court system's coming to a head with new bills filed in the state legislature to rein in the power of the guardians ad litem system. Now, if you haven't heard of a guardian ad litem, consider yourself lucky. But for those who have, it can be a nightmare. Investigative reporter Emily Johnson is with me now to break it all down. Emily, let's start with the big question. What is a guardian ad litem, and what's sort of the big problem here that you've been investigating?
Well, that's a great question because I think most people don't really know what a guardian ad litem is, and we'll refer to them as a GAL. That's what many people in courts and attorneys refer to them on second reference as. But basically, there's two different types. There's a volunteer GAL, and there is a private GAL. A private GAL is often an attorney basically an approved trained individual. And then a volunteer GAL basically goes through these different types of trainings. And they work as a third-party individual in a court case, especially normally involving custody or child abuse, maybe with DSS. And they work to be that party for the judge outside of a courtroom. So they can basically give the information that a judge cannot see because a judge cannot go visit, the home of a family. So they go to the home and collect all this different information, basically medications children are taking, if they're left alone, the type of environment inside their house. That's kind of what they collect before they present that information back to the judge.
Now, you've actually spoken to a couple of different attorneys about this, and they are expressing a little bit of frustration with this system itself. What kind of frustration are they seeing in their everyday coursework?
It's been interesting because almost every attorney we've spoken with, whether or not we interviewed them or just had an initial conversation on the phone, definitely think this is a very large problem. And it comes from the lack of accountability and the lack of qualifications for these individuals, which we'll get into a little bit later. But there's also just not a lot of oversight from the state as a whole in what these individuals in these positions are allowed to do and what type of recommendations they're allowed to give to the court.
One of those lawyers that you did speak with, Representative Gil Gatch, a state lawmaker, but also a lawyer who deals with these exact problems. Let's play a little bit of the conversation that you had with him where he's expressing this deep discontent with just how much power some of these guardian ad litems have.
There is no opportunity for somebody to go after a guardian civilly. There's no real opportunity to go after a guardian ad litem if they have done something egregious in the court, in family court. And there's really no opportunity for an Office of Disciplinary Counsel action, the body that governs our lawyers' ethics. Even they don't do anything to guardian ad litems if they do something bad. So it begs, the question remains, what can we do to instill confidence in our citizenry? These folks who are in family court, how do we instill confidence in them that the system is honest? And I think a part of instilling that trust and reinstilling that trust is making sure that we have something on the books that shows that guardian ad litems are held to the same standard that other lawyers are in the way that they conduct themselves in court. And right now, I think that there's a little bit of a hole in that area. Gil Gatch, a lawyer, does something that violates the rules of professional conduct. I have to either self-report to the Office of Disciplinary Counsel, or another lawyer reports me, or my client or the opposing party. Anybody can report me if they think that I have done something that's violated professional conduct and ethics rules. And then I will have to make a defense as to why I have not, okay? Guardian ad litems are not subject to the Office of Disciplinary Counsel at all. Routinely, the Office of Disciplinary Counsel will say that they do not have jurisdiction over guardian ad litems, even when they are lawyers. And I don't believe that that is something that benefits the family court system, because if you aren't subject to accountability, there is little disincentive to color outside of the lines.
All right, so obviously we're talking about the fact that there is no real significant oversight in some of these cases, and especially when we start talking about the lay gals. These are the folks that aren't lawyers but have gone through the process to get basically a classification to be a guardian ad litem. But what kind of qualifications do those individuals have to have, the hoops they have to jump through just to be classified as a gal?
Well, the qualifications a lay gal needs is really just having either a GED or graduating from high school, being over the age of 25, and passing a 30-hour online course. And that is kind of why these problems have been raised, in part is because of the minimal qualifications that they're kind of held to and the standard that they're held to.
I mean, this is a very important position in the court that's going to be determining, the fate of a child and a family. When you hear that it's effectively more difficult to get a driver's license than it is to become this powerful position in the court, as you discovered that, were you surprised?
Oh, 100%. I think I personally have not had to go through family court yet in my life, but if I was and having to deal with somebody kind of holding a big part of your life in their hands, I mean, you're almost helping the court to determine who gets custody in some points, point blank, just 100% custody, other times obviously split, but it's shocking to see that some of these people have no experience with children, with being even in schools, having experience being around children. And then how are you supposed to know when they're telling you the truth if you're interviewing them about their mom or dad, or if they were coached by their mom and dad? And a lot of attorneys say it seems like sometimes they talk to these family members and they're like, why did my kid say that? I don't even understand where that's coming from. And a lot of the times it's because the gal is almost, inserting their own bias almost into the conversation.
Well, and bias is one of the things that the lawyers brought up in your interviews is that, especially when raising kids, I think parents, I think adults in general, everybody has their own way of doing it, right? And your way isn't necessarily right or wrong compared to my way, but it seems like the lawyers have told you that they're running into sometimes these culture conflicts where maybe the guardian ad litem doesn't see eye to eye on things like politics or things like culture. And I think that is something that that we hear not just from Gil Gatch, but also from another lawyer that you interviewed, family attorney Ryan Schwartz, right?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because he brings up, like you said, the difference in your socioeconomic background can play a larger part than you think. And a lot of the times when these lay gals are assigned to a case, they're volunteer. They might not come from an individual that's before the court because they're going through a DSS case, which is oftentimes a lot of a different type of background than somebody who's doing this kind of just to give back to the community. And that's kind of what he goes into, is just how that can truly impact the course of the case.
Yeah, I think both Gatch and Schwartz mentions that here in this next clip that we have.
We would be children if we were to pretend that people don't have political opinions, religious opinions, that they don't take a stance on an issue one way or the other. Nobody is completely unbiased, right? And I have seen guardian ad litems who, by the way, the majority of guardian ad litems are not staunch conservatives. The majority of guardian ad litems are not Trump supporters, right? But a lot of my clients are. A lot of my clients are staunch conservatives, okay? And you can tell that a person who might wear a MAGA hat or have a Trump flag, on their flagpole, you can tell that this guardian ad litem thinks that that's a problem. But the guardian ad litem isn't there to decide whether a person's political ideology is good or bad. They're supposed to be there to find out whether or not the person is an able, willing, and fit parent.
If you only have an education that's very limited, you're put in the position of speaking for that child in the best interest of the child. A lot of times it comes down to personal bias. And a lot of times the folks that are lay guardians are retired or have access to funds, have never been through the system, and while their heart might be in the right place, they don't relate to the people who are going through the system, typically. And they've never walked a mile in their shoes.
So exactly what you were saying about not having the same life experience as some of the folks that are going through family court. I wonder though, is there a way in your reporting, is there a way for a family to say, we're having problems with our guardian ad litem, we want a new one? What did you find?
And there is a case where we have seen that was presented to the court and one specific gal was removed, disqualified from the case. But the problem is, first off, that's very rare, according to the attorneys. It's very hard and difficult to prove that a gal is either acting out of their scope, not qualified enough to get them pulled off of a case. But even if you can prove that, they're only disqualified from one case. They're not disqualified to be a gal in general, so they can continue to work and just have to basically go on with their backgrounding, and the judge still approves them to go forward.
Well, and one thing we haven't talked about just yet is that there's a cost associated with this. I mean, in the same way that you've got to pay for your own ankle bracelet when you're being monitored, you've got to pay for these court services. The guardians ad litem, they cost money, right?
And that's something in a DSS case, maybe where you have a public defender, you assume, okay, I'm not going to have to pay for this extra third-party representative who is the gal. And because even though it's a private gal that gets basically put onto these cases, we're not talking about the lay gals because those are volunteers, but the private gals, they can, as long as this case goes on, they can ask the courts for more money and can say, oh, I'm having to use more resources, which a lot of the times the courts do approve because a case is continued, so they do deserve to get paid. But sometimes these costs are just incredibly high that families that are going through this process are already paying sometimes thousands of dollars for attorneys in the first place and now have to pay this extra fee that they probably didn't expect that they were required to pay in the first place.
Yeah, I think the family that you interviewed, the Bell family, they said something like the cost was like $5,000 or something, and they couldn't pay it, right?
Yep, and they couldn't pay it because she was a single mother at the time trying to help her two children grow up in the midst of this custody battle, and because she didn't pay is where we're kind of going to get into, and I don't know if you want me to talk about that before we roll on the next soundbite, but there's a repercussion for not paying, and that is a problem in itself to me and to the lawyers I've spoken with, that you are punished for not being able to afford this third-party representative who's supposed to be there for the benefit of both parties, and yet you're forced to pay them in the end.
The family you spoke with, she ended up going to jail, correct?
Yep. She went to jail twice. The first time the courts tried to get her behind bars for 60 days, she ended up negotiating and did not have to go in for a full 60, but she had to go in twice in 1 month.
But that was because she couldn't pay.
That's because she could not pay that gal fee.
Wow, that's pretty wild because, I mean, normally you don't get locked up for not being able to pay your bills. It sounds like, this is a different scenario altogether. I think in the sound that we're about to play, you had asked her about sort of her reaction to finding out that she was going to have to basically go to jail. Let's play that.
She said, you owe the guardian a light and you didn't pay her. I said, ma'am, I didn't have any money, ma'am. I am a contractor, ma'am. If I don't work, I don't make money. How am I able to pay this lady this a high amount? If I'm paying my bills, no help, and taking care of my kids, I don't care about that. You're supposed to pay her. I was scared. I was so scared. I was frustrated. I was scared. I said, Lord, why is this happening to me, God? I thought my life was ending at that time.
I mean, you can hear the sadness in her voice, the scared. She said she's scared. I believe her.
Well, and exactly the point is that she can't make money if she's behind bars. Right. Is her point. And how are you supposed to pay it off if the second you get out, I don't remember the timeline, but have a week or two to make up that money. And then if you don't pay it, she was put back behind bars. And so it almost defeats the entire purpose to me. Is I understand that these individuals do need to get paid because they're working for the courts. They're, they have credentials for it, but it's at what point does somebody need to be punished in that dramatic of a fashion almost?
So let's talk about solutions for a moment because Representative Gatch, he has introduced a couple of bills to address this system, which I think he would argue is a broken system right now, or is at least not an optimal system for all parties involved, really, except for the gals here. What bills has he filed? What changes would he like to see?
He's filed a number. He's been one of the only people from my backgrounding that has been kind of taking a deeper look in a legislative manner to address these gal problems. And it kind of goes the most, I would say, harsh one would be eliminating the volunteer gals altogether unless two parties agree to that being the outcome. Because some people don't even know that it's a volunteer. They're just, we're assigned this individual who's going to help us in our case. And so that is probably the more harsh one. The other ones are limiting their costs, how much they can charge in general to families, limiting their scope and what they can present to a court. Because a lot of the times, although they're supposed to be bringing forward this evidence and the materials from both mom and dad and assessing the children, a lot of the times, and at the bottom of one of the forms, it says recommendations, where the point of the gal is supposed to be a middleman, essentially, non-biased, and they're presenting they can literally say, I think the mother deserves custody. Or
Right,
the
they're
father
supposed
deserves
to be on
custody.
the side of the child.
Yes.
Not necessarily the mom or the dad or whoever the parties are, but they're supposed to be the advocate, the eyes and the ears for the child.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what's kind of missing the mark, I think, is the larger problem. But so those bills kind of go from everywhere. It's the scope that they are allowed to go, the costs, who is assigned to what types of cases. And he's filed multiple, but those are the ones that I think are the most important and the most, applicable to the story itself.
Just as you were doing this reporting, as you were finding these people that have been victims of the system and talking to the lawyers involved, what surprised you the most?
It's a great question. Honestly, I think other than the requirements, because we've done stories in the past where we're kind of shocked about requirements that are allowed for people in many different types of positions. But I think it's just shocking to see the punishment that these families can have. I mean, like I said, I've never been through family courts, but you're already going through something that is hurting you financially, emotionally, sometimes physically, and now on top of it, you have to go to jail because you cannot pay the fees. That shocked me to see. And the impact, I mean, we've gotten emails, even just ever since our promos have aired, we've gotten emails again and again from people that have gone through the family court system. They're like, thank you for looking into this, because there's so many layers that us as journalists and the public can't even see, because it's a family court case. It's different because there are, minors involved and whatnot. But it's just seeing how much, yes, the gal problem is one in its own, but it seems like the family court system in South Carolina is also a different beast that many people have concerns about.
It's wild to me that every 6 months or so, you do another story or we hear of another story about the South Carolina legal system. Sometimes it's criminal, sometimes it's civil. Now it's family court. Judges are in the hot seat, how we select them, things they've done. I just wonder, how important is it to you to just be able to continue to inspect this system as a wider entity and continue to bring attention to even things that folks would never know about unless they're going through it, like this guardians ad litem system?
Well, and I think that's been personally something I've really loved to investigate, is just we've seen so many, I never would have expected this many different types of courts
Right.
have almost similar problems, but so different and are nuanced in their own ways. And not a lot of people are looking into it because a lot of it is either not publicly accessible, or there's not enough people voicing their concerns, or not enough people looking into the concerns. But it seems like, and that's the hard thing, and that's the hard response to your question, is there isn't one blatant solution for the entire South Carolina legal system. It's all so nuanced and so many different things. And yet COVID is still blamed for a lot of the backlog and all these different moving parts. But I think that's why myself and other members of our investigative team are so passionate about making sure we shine a light on the courts, because it's not easy to find the common trends, but trying to find the people that voice those concerns and looking into the larger problems is kind of, I think, how we're continuing and hoping to continue to tackle the courts in South Carolina in the future.
Yeah, certainly as you're peeling back the layers of the onion, you find more and more problems, and by exposing them through our reporting, hopefully that lights a fire under the legislature to do whatever it needs to be done, whether that's providing more funding to the court system to shorten times that it takes to get through trial, or to fix the guardians ad litem system, or whatever the situation is. I think the hope is that the continued reporting will eventually lead to some change.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. And that's all we can kind of do from our standpoint, is just to continue to shine a light on these problems and hope that it sparks the change and pushes things like these bills that Gatch put into effect, or put into legislation, push them hopefully forward by showing these examples that we've also compiled ourselves.
All right, well, we'll be watching for it in the legislative session this year. Starts in January. We'll see how far these bills get and what impact they may have in the future.
Exactly.
Emily, thanks.
Thanks, Nick.